I'd like to call the board meeting to order via Zoom webinar at 6 p.m. and announce the board met in closed session and the following action was taken. The board took action and unanimously approved the appointment of the following administrators: Diane Stranding for principal at Robert J. Fite Elementary, Mark Hogue, principal Charles Mack Elementary, Mark Benson, principal Laguna Creek High School, and Ann Regale, Director, Special Education, EGUSD. Congratulations, welcome. Good evening and welcome to the Elk Grove Unified School District's virtual board meeting through the Zoom webinar platform. We thank you for joining us and ask for your patience in advance as we learn to navigate this new platform for conducting school board meetings. Legislative bodies, including school districts, are now permitted to hold board meetings telephonically or by other electronic means because on March 17th, 2020, the governor issued Executive Order N-29-20, suspending certain provisions of the California Ralph M. Brown Act. In addition, consistent with the March 19th, 2020 statewide shelter-in-place order issued by the governor, Executive Order N-3320, the Sacramento County Shelter-at-Home Order issued on March 19th, 2020 and April 7th, 2020, and the Center for Disease Control Social Distancing Guidelines, which discourage public gatherings. This board meeting is conducted via the Zoom webinar platform. Generally, public comments can be submitted to the board on items on the board's meeting agenda and also on those items that do not relate to items on the agenda, but are within the board's jurisdiction. Tonight, as noted on the board meeting agenda and district website, electronic public comments that were submitted to the board by 5:30 p.m. tonight through the Google platform, accessible through the district's website, will be read to the board relative to the appropriate agenda item. This includes any public comments related to closed session. I'd like to call on Ms. Pinkerton to read any comments regarding closed session items.
Thank you, Madam Board President. There were no public comments regarding the closed session items.
Thank you. Also, please be advised that everyone participating via Zoom webinar is muted and all board members' votes will be by roll call. Members of the board present tonight are myself, Beth Albiani, Board Clerk Crystal Martinez-O'Leary, Board Member Nancy Cheras Espinoza, Board Member Carmine Forcina, Board Member Chet Madison, Board Member Tony Perez, Board Member Bobby Singh-Ellen. In addition, today's Zoom webinar meeting is being video recorded and will be available on your district's YouTube channel. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to ask Mr. Craig Murray if he would please lead the group.
Thank you, President Albiani. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Next, I would like to call on Zonti Pinkerton to read public comments regarding the recognition of food and nutrition services as school lunch heroes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Board President Albiani. There were no public comments per the recognition. However, there is recognition. So that both myself and Deputy Superintendent Robert Pierce would like to express on behalf of the Food Nutrition Services staff. So since the declaration of the National Public Health Emergency and local orders to close schools throughout Sacramento County, continuing nutritious meals through drive-up and delivery services have converted our Food Nutrition Services employees to first responders who work on the front lines, ensuring our students and in many cases their families receive prepared meals and groceries during the current COVID-19 crisis. As of March 15th, and at this point in time, I'd also like to bring up Ms. Michelle Drake, who will be representing, she's the director of our Food Nutrition Services, and she also is here to represent the Food Nutrition Services staff. As of March 17th, Elk Grove Unified School District helped prepare, pack, and serve over 570,000 meals to ensure students still have access to nutritional meals while schools were closed and have been closed. So we join the City of Sacramento to recognize Michelle Drake and Food Nutrition Service employees and thank them for providing healthy meals to thousands of students across the district. They are our school lunch heroes. So we would like to ask that the Board of Education recognize Ms. Michelle Drake and the Food and Nutrition Services staff as school lunch heroes for their extraordinary work to ensure children and families have access to healthy food options.
Thank you. It really is my staff. I just want to say really quickly, it's really my staff. I'm just the leader of about 400, and if it wasn't for them being willing to work outside their comfort zone, working in positions that they don't normally work in, working at sites they don't normally work at, working in the elements, rain, shine, whatever the case may be, they've been out there and they've done it with a happy heart and a kind smile for the families in our communities. And so I really appreciate the staff that I have and how great they've been to come out and provide meals for all the kids in our communities. So thanks for allowing us to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Drake. You are heroes, and we agree. Going to move on to student requests for student expulsions. I'd like to call on Ms. Pinkerton to read public comments regarding requests for return from student expulsions.
Madam Board President, there are no public comments regarding student expulsions.
Thank you. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the return from student expulsions. We'll do a roll call. I'm sorry, did I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. A roll call vote, Mr. Forcina? Mr. Forcina, we couldn't hear your vote.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Cheres Espinoza?
Aye.
Dr. Martinez O'Leary?
Aye.
Mr. Madison?
We didn't hear you, Chet.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Mr. Perez?
Aye.
Ms. Singh Allen?
Aye.
Thank you. I as well. That is unanimous. Thank you. Public comment is our next item. Public written comments that were submitted through the district's Google Public Comments form by 5:30 tonight will be read. Ms. Pinkerton, would you please read public comments on items not on the board agenda or related to closed session?
Yes, Madam Board President, there were 6 public comments on items not on the board agenda or related to closed session. So I will start with the first one. The first one comes from Maria Valdez, and she simply states, quisiera que tengan más motivación los niños, which is translated to, we would like more motivation for students. The second public comment is anonymous, and it simply says, due to COVID-19, it is our understanding that the 2020-2021 California State Education budget has been cut by billions of dollars. Our son attends Folks Ranch Elementary, where for the past 6 years, he's been taught and nurtured by a staff of exceptional people. We would like to see if there's any way Elk Grove Unified can make public to its parents the amount of previously budgeted basic education funds that will now be missing per student. While not mandatory, we would like to see that number so that we, and perhaps others who are able, may help out by writing a check to our particular school. The third public comment comes from Carola Valdez. My children are educationally declining every day, and they are lucky. with parental attention and strong internet access. There is no substitute for a classroom, and a sustained removal from that classroom will be irrevocably hazardous to their education and the education of their peers, which will create tragedies far beyond the scope of COVID-19. Institute whatever measures are necessary, but please reinstate classroom learning. Additionally, the year-rounders are already at a school day deficit as compared to their traditional calendar counterparts, and they are left out of every conversation. It is not fair that our children, particularly year-rounders, are denied quality education. Google Classroom cannot replicate. It's not even a stopgap measure. Additionally, we must mention those who are insecure, violent homes, or those who do not have the access to the drive-through lunch lines. We are throwing them to the wolves right now. Thank you. The next public comment comes from Teresa, no last name. What will you do to make sure our children will go back to school with as minimal change as possible, ensuring our children won't have to wear masks, social distance, etc.? I'm on the verge of considering homeschooling my 3 children. Not that I want to, but for my children's mental sake, I feel I might. The next public comment comes from Mr. Matt Williams. Schools either need to open for fall semester or there needs to be no expectation for new learning. Families with working parents, early elementary students, multiple children, children with behavior problems, single parents, and so many more variables are not able to teach their children adequately at home and cannot guarantee that their children will be present at scheduled digital class meetings. Distance learning places an insurmountable burden on these families and does more harm than the absence of formal education. If it isn't safe to resume school, then it is unrealistic and unreasonable to expect children to meet grade level learning standards. The last public comment is anonymous. Will employment information be given about the status of probationary 2 teachers? Will temporary teachers have a chance to be interviewed? That concludes public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Pinkerton. We have staff that can follow up with the concerned people that were identified. That would be appreciated. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda. Call on Ms. Pinkerton to read any public comments regarding the consent agenda. I can't hear you, Ms. Pinkerton. I'm sorry.
Sorry, there are no public comments regarding the consent agenda.
All right, then I will call for a motion to approve items 1 through 12 on the consent agenda.
I approve.
It's been seconded by Ms. Singh Allen. Thank you. That will be a roll call vote. Ms. Singh Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Perez?
Aye.
Mr. Madison?
Aye.
Nay?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Dr. Martinez O'Leary? We didn't hear your verbal.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Cheres Espinoza? Thank you. And Mr. Forcina?
Aye.
Thank you. And I as well, so that is unanimous. We have passed the consent agenda. The next item is a budget update. Ms. Pinkerton, do you have any public comments regarding the budget update?
Madam Board President, there are no public comments regarding the budget update.
Great. Now I'd like to call on Ms. Shannon Hayes to present our budget update.
Good afternoon, President Albiani. I'm going to actually turn this over to Mr. Rob Pierce, our Deputy Superintendent for Business Services and Facilities, and he's going to kick us off regarding the Governor's May revise and its impact to Elk Grove Unified School District.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Hoffman and Ms. Avalos, I want to first thank you and everyone for their work thus far and for everyone's willingness to come together to share and discuss the budget situation as it unfolds. I would also like to thank everyone for their patience, as tonight's presentation has been a work in progress, and as they say, it's hot off the press. Special thanks to Superintendent Hoffman and Ms. Hayes, who will be presenting and sharing information with you tonight as well. But they, like me and many of our staff members and others, have been working nonstop on this since last Thursday, well into Friday night, early Saturday morning, throughout the weekend, yesterday, and culminating early this morning throughout the day as we've listened to a few different May revision workshops and taken input from experts throughout the field. I will say that although this is going to be very sobering news and not where we thought we were just a few short months ago, one thing for sure is that we will take this all together as an EGUSD family, and we will get through this. The only certainty we have is that this is all going to change before the final budget is adopted in June, and we obviously all hope that that changes for the better. So for our agenda tonight, we're going to talk about our budget development. We're going to look back at where we were. We're going to talk about our preparation for the unknown and as that unfolded. We're obviously going to introduce the governor's May revise. We're going to talk about the impacts of the May revise to us and the state of California. We're going to talk to you a little bit about funding the gap, and we're going to talk to you about our next steps. So these are our 5 budget agreements, if you will, regarding how we approach our budget development process. They are maintain fiscal solvency, maintain and evaluate what we have built over the past few years, the desire to remain competitive, build upon what we have already started, and contemplate new programs and initiatives. And as the board and our bargaining unit partners know, that depending on the nature of our finances and where we are with regard to budget, we advance up and down and retract up levels, again, depending on where we stand financially. But clearly, with the state of the economy and the news that we're receiving right now, maintaining fiscal solvency is where our focus must be. So again, based on the state of the current economy and the events we are focused on maintaining our fiscal solvency, we've been sharing multiple funding scenarios since March so that we can be in the best financial situation possible. We've relied on fiscal reports from multiple agencies. We've relied on information from FCMAT, the Department of Finance, the Legislative Analyst's Office, School Services of California, CSBA, CASBO, and many more. As part of this work, we've engaged the Board of Education, obviously, throughout this process. Our partners in education have met with us on 2 occasions. We've shared this information with our principals and administrators. We've also begun to share this information with district employees. And tonight, we're obviously sharing this information publicly with our community and our stakeholders based on the information that we've received Thursday.
So as we look back, we wanted to share where we were. We thought we were in pretty good standing. We knew the state of California was in good standing, but things progress in a manner by which we have to respond, usually prior to the state responding. So as we adopted our current year budget, it was based on the governor's May revise from May of 2019. At that time, the state had projected a COLA of 3% in 2021 school year and 2.8 in 21-22 school year, which was going to generate ongoing LCFF revenue to the tune of $17.3 million and $17.4 million, respectively. Then just a few short weeks after that, the state adopted their budget. And at that point in time, we learned the district was going to receive adjustments to our special education funding model, providing an additional $4.9 million in one-time funds and a reduction to the CalPERS employer rate, which was saving the district $900,000. So that's where we were at state adoption for current fiscal year 2019-20. So what that looks like in a multi-year projection as we come into first interim, we had concerns at that point in time as the governor produced his budget with a potential upcoming recession. So for those of you that have been in the business side for a long time, you'll know that recessions usually come in cycles, and people were estimating that we were due for one, if you will. I know just from my experience doing this for the last too many years, I guess I'll say, that the COLAs that were presented at that point in time and what the state had adopted were too high. We presented first interim and we pointed out to the board at that time that the 2021 school year, that 3% was probably too high and wouldn't meet the statutory COLA amount. So at that point in time, we were starting to look at different options for us as a district. Also, in the state revenue line in 1920, we were projecting $608 million in revenue, and then we were going to lose that 4.9 that for special education students. So at that point in time, we were looking at a deficit in our current year of 13.9 million. That was done by design. That is attributable to our funding priorities that are funded in a one-time manner, which is why you see in fiscal year 2021, we have a surplus at this point in time of 4.8 million and then 9.4 in the next year. So those numbers we felt were pretty comfortable with. We were able to meet our obligations, even with that special education money being one-time in nature. Our fund balance at that point in time was sitting at 11%. The recommended amount of where your reserve should be is right around 16%. So we were thinking things were pretty good at this point, and our only concern was, what is that COLA going to look like going forward? So then the governor put out his January budget proposal, and as we were anticipating, the COLA dropped. It went from 3% down to 2.29, and then 2.71 in 21-22, which reduced our revenue down to 12.8 million in 2021 and 16.3 million in 21-22. We also learned that the changes to the special education funding model would be converted to ongoing, so that was a plus. We also learned that the governor had proposed a number of different grants, grants to help with the California's education shortage, computer science education, and funding nutrition. And so with that information that came out in January, we then prepared our second interim financial report, which is the January's governor's budget proposal, along with our projections of our budget based on January 31st. And we took that information to the board, and the board took action on March 17th, 2020, right after our school closures. Looking at our multi-year projection at this point in time at second interim, the 4.9 million in special education revenue is recorded now in 2021 school year. The COLAs have been reduced to what the governor's budget proposal had stated. The same night of March 17th, the board did take action to approve our first level of funding priorities, which has now been recorded in this multi-year projection. So we go to a deficit, or excuse me, a surplus of $462,000 in the second year and 6.4 in the third year.
Okay, so notwithstanding the information that Shannon was sharing and that we started to see some declines in future year COLAs, there's no doubt that California began 2020 very strong financially. And up until the pandemic, it certainly remained that way. The unemployment rate was at 3.9%, which is extremely low. The untenable wall of debt that started with the Great Recession had now been completely eliminated. The proposed 2021 budget included a nearly $6 billion surplus and record reserve levels at over $21 billion for fiscal year 2021. And on top of all of that, revenues through March were $1.5 billion above the January projections. So again, things still looked very favorable. However, as we are painfully aware, the impacts of COVID-19 had an immediate and severe impact on the global, national, state, and local economies. And in 2 short months, we entered into a deep recession. A recession that will seemingly combine all the impacts from all of the years of the Great Recession and compress that into a single moment in time. Since mid-March, more than 4.5 million unemployment claims were filed in California. Projections indicate that the 2020 unemployment rate will be 18%, which is higher than the Great Recession's peak. Personal income is projected to decline by 9% on an annual basis. And the three main general fund revenue sources are projected to drop on average of 25% compared to what was forecasted in January. This all results in the Proposition 98 calculation falling by roughly $19 billion. So this slide is jumping a little bit ahead in the presentation because it starts unveiling the realities of the May revise, but it does a really nice job in portraying the immediate impacts of the recession on Proposition 98, otherwise known as funding for K-12. The teal bars represent the Prop 98 funding year after year as proposed in each of those years by the governor's budget proposal. And the red bars to the far right represent the Prop 98 funding change based on the 2020 May revision. From the representation, you can see a massive reduction in what was proposed in January, again in the teal bar if you look at 2021, to May for 2021. So a sizable decrease in the Prop 98 funding under the May revision from where we were in January. Essentially, this is going to put us at a reality that our funding levels, if nothing changes, are going to be at the same level they were in 2015-16. So this is a slide that we've borrowed and kind of personalized for Elk Grove Unified. This is a slide that FCMAT will utilize, but this is the 4 critical budget categories for any district. And in this case, it's these 4 categories for the fiscal year 2019-20. They are revenue, expenditures, reserve, and cash, the 4 most important things of any budget. So in terms of revenue for 19-20, it was fairly stable. It was looking to increase over time, as Ms. Hayes just shared with you. In fact, even with the closures, our ADA was held harmless by quick action by Governor Newsom and the legislature. We did realize, though, even within that lottery and other local revenues would be down slightly. But again, having the ADA held harmless was a huge rallying point for us. In terms of expenditures, clearly we had some increased expenditures due to COVID-19 and distance learning, but we believe that this is going to be offset for 19-20 in savings in other areas, due in part by quick action by the board and the district, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. In terms of reserves, we did start the year expecting reserves to trend down slightly, again, based on Ms. Hayes's representation of the multi-year projection and deficit spending in 19-20. But again, we believe that is going to be overshadowed by savings and expenditures for the fiscal year. And cash was very strong for 19-20. We now know, based on the May revision, that we're going to see a June deferral. So that will work to weaken our cash standing for 19-20, and that deferral will go over till 2021. So we will have to borrow from ourselves in lieu of that June apportionment. And then preparing for the unknown. So preparing for the budget year 2021. These are the same 4 critical areas of our budget. In terms of revenue, simply put, the January proposal is out the window. It's a distant thought as a result of the rapid and sudden decline in state resources. We know there's currently hope for additional federal assistance. And although we knew we had a statutory COLA of 2.31%, we now know that the funded COLA is proposed to be a negative 10%. In terms of the expenditure side, continued distance learning and social distancing costs will increase. You will see later in the presentation that there's limited state flexibility offered in the May revision. And by that, I mean flexibilities that were afforded us in the Great Recession. Many of those did not surface in the May revise. So we'll be limited in terms of what we can do on the expenditures. With regard to reserves, they're always critical to maintain, but they're most certainly going to decline rapidly in the out years, more specifically without significant federal relief. And again, that piece is an unknown moving forward. Cash will certainly decline rapidly. You're going to see later in the presentation that there's multiple deferrals in the 2021 fiscal year. So we're going to have to, borrow from ourselves again. That's going to absorb some of our cash. And as we continue to spend down reserves, that's less cash available at the same time. So right about the time that we had worked so hard and successfully in establishing and beginning our distance learning program, we started getting very grim budget news, and we had to immediately shift gears and look at how we could mitigate for our funding reductions. To prepare for the impacts, we implemented a spending freeze. We implemented a hiring freeze, which means Cabinet will review all open positions and make a determination as to whether or not they'll be filled. We're also actively exploring delays in instructional material adoptions, a possible reduction in professional learning, as well as a possible reduction of summer school and extended learning. The purpose of this is simply to increase reserves as much as possible for 2019-20 and into 2020-21.
As we transition to the governor's May revise and the components of what changed from January till May, it's important to note that the unemployment rate skyrocketing and the economy has suffered dramatically. The federal government has provided relief, albeit it's one time. It's funded through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security, which is known as CARES Act. A couple of things that we do know, and we were able to calculate of what the impact will be for Elk Grove specifically, is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency, or ESSER funds. 1.5 billion statewide will be going to LEAs. Coronavirus Relief Fund, another 4 billion statewide will be coming to LEAs. And the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, known as GEAR, is another 355 million that's statewide that will go to LEAs. And this particular CARES Act funding has been the one that we've been struggling with the most, trying to figure out where does Elk Grove fit based on the trailer bill language. And then again, what we heard through School Services of California, it's just kind of up in the air. It's got weird strings to it. Although it's earmarked to schools, we do have to apply. There are spending guidelines that are along with it, as well as a spending term. So we're struggling with those and how we can fold those into our existing budget and our existing expenses. The Governor's May revise also included a reduction to LCFF. As Mr. Pierce stated, our Prop 98 funding proposal for May is dramatically down. The Governor wrote into his budget proposal that we would see a 10%, netting a reduction of 7.69, which means they froze the COLA that we had projected of 2.31% and then cut the LCFF revenue by another 10. So it's 7.69 of a reduction over where we thought we were going to be, and it's 10% cut from 19-20 funding levels. The cost of living adjustment that was proposed also is applied normally to categorical funds. So that was also suspended. So we do not see an increase with special education, child nutrition, preschool, or the mandate block grant programs that we participate in. We also are seeing a cut to our existing categorical programs, approximately 50%, which will affect our after school and safety programs, our K-12 Strong Workforce CTE program, our Career Technical and Education program known as CTIG, our Adult Education Block Grant, and our California Partnership Academies and SSPs, and our Ag Incentive Grant. The Governor continues to fund the proposed revised special education funding model. So as I talked about earlier, when we came into first interim, we found out that we would have another $4.9 million ongoing. So this continues that. There was talk at one point that based on the economy of the state that they would pull that back. Well, he has not. So that is a huge plus for us to keep that 4.9. It's also going to provide funding to assist regional alternative dispute resolution services. There's issues with our special education population whereby they're not able to necessarily meet the needs of an IEP. So there's things that come from that. So he's estimating about $7 million to support that. Then another $15 million is proposed for the Golden State Teacher Scholarship Program to increase the number of fully prepared special education teachers. So in our district, we still have a difficult time finding special education teachers. And so that has been an initiative for the district for a long time, using state grant money as well. We have a program in our district whereby they are sending classified staff through the system that hopefully then will become teachers going forward. And as Mr. Pierce mentioned, the deferrals, the state's proposing to defer $5.3 billion for 1920 and the 2021 years, deferring approximately $1.9 billion for June of 2020, which means we will be paid the cash that's due to us in July of 2020. The proposal also is deferring approximately $3.4 billion in 2021 to 21-22. And this most likely is going to have the district have to seek a tax and revenue anticipation note or a trans. We have to ensure that we have enough cash to meet our obligations. So we will look internally at interfund borrowing, but more than likely we'll have to go outside and get a loan to ensure that we have enough cash. In the governor's proposal, he also reduced the contribution for employers to both CalSTRS and CalPERS. You can see the drop is down to 16.15 in 2021 and 16.2 for CalSTRS in 21-22. And CalPERS goes down to 20.7 and then 22.84 in 21-22. So this is approximately $6.2 million that we had originally projected as an increase in cost for 2021 and 21-22, that based on these reduced rates, the district would save that money.
What I do want to share with the board is it gets a little complex in defining where the governor pulled money to have a more immediate offset to these employer rate contributions. But what I do want to note for you is, although this does have immediate relief for us, we do pay for it later. The rates that are now being projected for 22-23 and beyond are actually increased over the rates when we last visited this in second interim. So decreasing immediate rates, but increasing future rates to offset.
So then looking at flexibility, there's very, very little flexibility given to school districts in order to respond and react to the loss in funding for the LCFF. Apportionment deferrals, they'll be given exemptions for districts that have documented hardships. We do have a revised calculation for the retune restricted maintenance program. We have increased limits on interfund borrowing. So we've always been able to borrow between funds, but this increases the amount that we can interfund borrow, and that will be a resolution that will be coming to the board for action if we want to exercise that particular area. Proceeds from the sale of surplus property into the general fund, that doesn't really apply to us because we're still growing and we have a need to build schools, so we wouldn't necessarily be selling property. And then the extension of the statutory timelines for the annual LEA audit. What we don't see in this proposal, like we saw with the Great Recession, is there was no relaxation with instructional days or instructional minutes. And that's because with distance learning, there's a very big concern at the state level that there's going to be learning loss. They want to mitigate that learning loss by allowing districts to use their CARES Act funds to increase the school year or increase the minutes in a day for children. That's difficult for us to respond to at this point because we don't even know if we can bring back students in a capacity by which we could take advantage of increasing days or increasing minutes. We still are one of the few districts in the state of California that runs a multi-track year-round. So with our current calendar, it's not flexible enough for us to respond in that manner. We do hope that there is flexibility with holding harmless our ADA. So for LCFF purposes, if our ADA is held harmless, we'll at least not see an additional reduction in funding. So those are things that we saw last time that we're not seeing this time. We don't know if that's going to change as the governor's May revision goes through the legislature. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think very much from the way the CARES Act money is currently written as far as the use, I don't see that those that flexibility to that tune would be something that would go forward. So what does that mean? We said an awful lot of stuff about loss of revenue, loss of funding. What does that mean for Elk Grove? So these are very, very rough numbers. At this point in time, we're still building our budget for next school year with anticipation of adoption before July 1. That is in Ed Code that we must do that. So regardless of where the May revise sits, there's different assumptions that we've applied just to show everybody what we're dealing with and trying to wrestle with. So at second interim, and remember that's old information. So second interim was a projection of our current year expenditures as of January 31st. So even though January wasn't that far away for us, number-wise, it's old data, if you will. So looking at that point in time, that snapshot, at that point in time, 2021 school year, we were projecting a surplus of $460,000. In 21-22, we were projecting a surplus of $6.4 million. So we thought we were in pretty good shape. We knew the state was having, you know, good receipts coming in. We were sitting pretty. We thought, you know what, we've got this. We can make some changes to programs. We can do stuff with our bargaining units, and that's where we were. Then they suspended the COLA. So in 2021, we were projecting 2.31%. That now goes away. So you see a reduction of 13.3 million in 2021. And then we were projecting in 21-22 a COLA increase of 2.71%. Because those COLAs are suspended and they're suspended in an ongoing manner, it's doubling, if you will. So it's a loss of 13.3 million in the first year. That same 13.3 million plus what the COLA was using 2.71% has a loss of revenue of $29.6 million. We take those out, and then the proposal to reduce the LCFF by 10% over 2021, excuse me, over 1920 school year, that's another 7.69%. So we're losing another $45.14 million ongoing. So the only way to put that back at this point in time would be the state would have to have enough money in Prop 98 to restore that. So back when we used to have revenue limits, they would deficit those amounts. We don't have the ability to do that with LCFF, and this is the first year that we've had to deal with an actual reduction. So that $45.14 million is going to roll through. He's also proposed the reduction to existing categorical programs. As I mentioned, it's about 50% of what we currently receive. That's another $3 million. And then we had some relaxing of the STRS and PERS employer rates. So we have money coming back of 6.17 million and then 6.2 million. And then the recalculation of the routine restricted maintenance account brings in revenue of 860,000. So before we do anything, if we just take what the governor proposed in the May revise without any federal funding, we would be deficit spending $53.95 million in 2021 and $61.24 million in 21-22. Those are huge numbers. That is not something that our reserve could cover. That is not something that we could fix in one fiscal year without completely decimating program. So there are federal funds that are in his May revision. ESSER funds, which that's already been, the ESSER funds have already been projected, and the CDE, who is administering those funds through the federal government, we know that our district is scheduled to receive 12.9 million in revenue. Now it's one time, so you don't see it going into 21-22 school year. It does have strings attached to it, and it also has the strings attached to it, and you have to do an application in order to access the funds. But we believe that we'll be able to spend the funds more over the 2-year period, so over 2021 and 21-22. But again, that's another one of those areas that is just uncertain right now in the May revise. Then the other piece of money that we have that's coming in under the CARES Act as well is the GEAR money and the CRF funds. So So this one is even more vague than the ESSER funds. We still believe that there's an application process in order to access the funds. We do believe that this action plan has to be approved by the board before we can even implement spending any of this money. And then the range from where we think we might be is huge. So we have one estimate of 40 million, which would leave us deficit spending $1 million. And then it doesn't do anything to take into account 21, 22. So still deficit spending the 61 million. We think we would receive as much as $60 million in one-time federal relief, which then would leave us a surplus in 2021 that we can then carry forward into 21, 22 to help offset that deficit. However, there's still a huge distance between 18.96 million and the 61.24 million that we're projecting a deficit for in 21, 22.
So Shannon, I just want to add a couple points to this. As Shannon said, this is for illustrative purposes only. We will be bringing a multi-year projection forward to you in June. Again, we anticipate that this will change. One thing that Superintendent Hoffman, I know, would like us to stress to you, the nexus between the 40 million that Ms. Hayes shared and the 60 million. The current proposal, as we understand it in the budget trailer bill language, allocates dollars at about $743 per ADA for districts that are concentration grant eligible. So in other words, a district that does not hit the 55% threshold or above in unduplicated count, they wouldn't receive a dime of that money. We heard strong feedback from the legislature yesterday. We're hearing feedback from advocates. We don't necessarily anticipate or expect that that number will stay the same. You know, I don't want to negotiate against ourselves and talk about policy per se, but we anticipate that that might be relaxed so that dollars are shared more equal throughout the state. That's the $40 million figure that Ms. Hayes shared with you. But again, that has yet to be seen. So the other unknowns that we're seeing right now is the governor in his verbal May revised presentation, he talked about making supplementary payments to the Prop 98 minimum. That doesn't start until 21, 22. But you can see the deficit that Ms. Hayes was referencing of $61 million. We heard today from a couple different sources that that's a difficult notion because adopting that in a budget bill straps future members of the legislature. That expands each fiscal year. It starts roughly $2 billion and expands upwards of $13 billion over time. Again, where the state's general fund would be augmenting and adding to the Prop 98 guarantee. That would obviously be a huge amount of revenue for our district, growing over time. The other piece are out-year COLAs. For the first time in my career, we heard from school services today that said, here's the Department of Finance's COLA projections. We are asking you, or recommending is probably the more appropriate word, we are recommending that you ignore those and you plan on a 0% COLA for the next 3 years out after the current budget year. So COLA is a huge factor moving forward, and this talk of a general fund supplement to Prop 98 is obviously a huge component of our out years.
And I'll just add, everything there that's been said is spot on. And the amount of work that's going to happen and discourse that's going to happen within the legislature in response to the governor's May revise, it's going to be deep and it's going to be heated. And the idea that there are students in the unduplicated counts who are not going to show up in funding for districts across the state, that's going to be very, very challenging. And there's legislators, senators, and assembly folks that are going to fight that tooth and nail. So this part of the presentation is by far the most challenging for us to get a firm grip on, and can have the most dramatic impact on what we look like moving forward. So a lot of work to be done in the next few weeks. This will be one of the key areas.
And for next steps, we're waiting very anxiously. Governor has asked the federal government to pass the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Bill Emergency Solutions, or they're calling it the HEROES Act. According to the governor in his May revision, if the federal government does come through with the HEROES Act, he can, with the stroke of a pen, remove that 10% reduction. Not sure what that looks like, but that was his intention. We're going to continue to advocate with our state and federal representatives. We're going to continue to analyze our budget as it's modified, and we're going to continually update our fiscal scenarios to ensure fiscal solvency. We've also been working collaboratively with our labor association partners, and we'll be bringing back to the board an actual adopted budget for 2021 and a multi-year projection the last board meeting in June.
Okay, and one other thing that I'd like to just point out, there was a lot of anticipation that the May revise would also give school districts an indicator of what the state's going to require of us in June. We expect that obviously the state has to adopt their budget by the end of June. It's constitutionally required. They're going to do that, but we also expect them to have to make adjustments because again, income taxes and other revenue sources won't be known until after they adopt their budget. We did hear and thought that there might be some flexibility for us in terms of what we are ultimately adopting. There was talk of not requiring districts to adopt the formalized budget that we're so used to, and then a requirement that you have to come back for 45-day revise and make those adjustments based on more solid numbers from the state. There was no talk of that whatsoever. And again, another key component that we're going to have to push hard on is there's no flexibility with regard to ADA, instructional minutes or instructional days, if distance learning or some form of distance learning has to continue into the next fiscal year. So those will be critical pieces for us. And with that, we would be happy to hear any comments and answer any questions.
Thank you for a very thorough presentation. I'm going to ask my fellow board members, Mr. Forcina, did you have any comments? You are unmuted right now.
Yeah, you got me?
Yes.
Yeah, I thank Shannon and Rob. I have a lot of questions, but at this point in time, it doesn't make any sense to me to ask the questions with the unknowns. And from the information shared, it seems like we'll move forward with 2021 with hopefully in terms of delivery of service, we don't know what that looks like yet, but minimal disruption. It's 21, 22 and beyond that is going to be the big impact. And I have a tremendous number of questions and concerns regarding the type of process that we will follow in making decisions with respect to what our district program will be. But once again, without knowing what that means, it's really hard to ask, specific questions, and I don't want to speculate. That's just a waste of time. So all I can say right now, I guess, is I appreciate the information and the work that's been certainly given to prepare the information, and it's for me just to wait, see.
Thank you, Mr. Forcina. Ms. Cheres Espinoza?
Madam President, appreciate the presentation despite the bad news. I wanted to ask, and again, following up on what Carmen said, that it may be too soon to answer these questions, but I'm going to ask and let you tell me if it's too soon. how does one effectuate a 10% cut in the current year when we are already, about a month out from closing the current year, or a couple of months from closing the current year, right? One of those slides said there's a 10% cut in 2019-20, which I think is the year that we're in. So did I misread that?
Can you
Shannon,
say what slide that's on, Ms. Espinoza?
You know what, I didn't note the slide number, but or did I note that wrong? Is there not a 10% cut in 2019-20?
No, there's not a 10% cut in 1920. The impact for 1920 is a cash impact because they're deferring our June apportionment to July. So the 10% comes from 2021, but it's a 10% reduction over 1920's funded amount.
That's what I misunderstood. Thank you, I appreciate that. Similarly though, whether it's current year or budget year, can you tell us what the impact of those categorical cuts would be?
So it's roughly 50% is our understanding. We don't have any details from the state level of what that value is. Most of our applications, or most of our programs in the CTE world, specifically the partnership academies and ag incentive, those are all in application phase right now. So we don't even know what we would have been awarded. So the $3 million that we're estimating as a shortfall for our categorical programs is based on how they were funded in the current year. So we're waiting to see what that looks like. We do know the monies in the CARES Act has CTE language written in it. So we would be able to use those funds to offset any shortfall that we would find in those particular areas, but we don't know what all of that looks like yet. Those are just big estimates at this point.
Thank you. Last question from me. Does the cost of a TRAN or a RAN go up in an environment like this where so many people need one?
I'll let Rob take that one.
Yeah, I mean, the cost, I gotta believe, Ms. Chaitis Espinoza, it's all relative, right? So there's clearly going to be a number of districts that are out seeking this. So there's going to be some economy of scale there. And depending on if you jump on board with a pool, there's multiple pools out there, trans pools. I think, though, because of the climate and the uncertainty of what the future holds, if you looked at Ms. Hayes' slide very closely, it quasi assumes the deferrals for 2021 will be paid back in 21-22, but we don't know. And there's still a question mark on that. So where the uncertainty comes and the interest rates or costs of issuance go up is when there's uncertainty of when those deferrals are going to be repaid, and therefore we pay back the institution that's loaning us the money. We're in a pretty good position, one, because of the size of our reserves, and two, because of the size of our capital budget, that we will be able to borrow from ourselves. But I don't think that we'll escape this without having to issue a trans, just because 5.3 billion in such short order is a significant ask of districts.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're finished, Ms. Espinoza? Dr. Martinez-Soler?
I want to thank everyone for the presentation. I think Rob and Shannon, you've been answering a lot of questions, and I appreciate that. You know, it's not surprising, given the circumstances that we're in, that we would be in a deficit in the upcoming years. It's just every time, you know, I hear the actual, when the May revise comes out and the different updates that I'm getting regarding the budget, it's very concerning as we move forward, especially next steps. I do have a number of questions similar to Mr. Forcina about the upcoming years and what that looks like regarding our district. But I know for for the sake of time, I'll hold those as well because we'll be having future discussions. I know you alluded to, Shannon, and throughout your presentation, that a number of the federal funding and the money that would be paid back to the district does have a number of strings attached. And so I was just wondering if you can mention some of the strings, not all of them, because I know it's very detailed, but just an overview so that way maybe people can understand what you mean by that. And then also, have concerns with the categorical reduction as well at 50%. And if there's any way that we could apply for additional funding possibly in the future, but I know it's very grim. So I just wanted you, if you can give an update. Thank you.
Sure. A lot of it is to mitigate learning loss. So the interest is to increase instructional time for kids, to purchase items in order to do some kind of level of distance learning. I'm trying to find my list here. Some of the other ones was like computer equipment, obviously food nutrition. They want to continue to have kids have not go hungry. I can't find my list, I apologize. But it's mostly education based. So keeping kids in school, after school type activities, increasing instructional minutes, increasing instructional days, those kinds of things in order to mitigate learning loss. And that's kind of the theme throughout the monies from all three components that we anticipate receiving. So it's not, you'll hear that they say it's unrestricted and can be used for any purpose. That's not exactly 100% true, but we do know what would happen with the loss of that money. We would have to, it would affect staff, right? We would lose employees through that process. So there will be probably some discussion of what would that core look like if that went away, because those would be the expenditures that would then be applied to those funds going forward. But we would first exercise all expenditures and apply anything that was an increased cost due to COVID-19. So we do have masks that we've purchased. We have costs in food nutrition from loss of meal reimbursement. So there are already things that have happened to us currently that we can exercise those funds for. It's just a matter of how do we get to them. So the application phase, board will have to take action, a plan will have to be written, it has to be vetted through the public. So it's not just free money, if you will.
One other piece that's critical within that is the second CARES Act dollars is a December of 2020 timeline to expend the funds. And with everything Ms. Hayes just explained with putting a plan together, vetting it through a board, vetting it through a community, that's going to leave very little time to actually expend the funds. So one of the biggest hamstrings in the whole piece is the timing related to when they would need to be expended. And we don't know if that is a state imposed idea that came through the governor's office, or if that's something written to the federal mandate when the funds were given to the states. So that's something we're going to spend some time and dive into in very short order.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that piece because I think just understanding that it's a process to apply for those funds.
Yeah, we'll have to be very creative in how we're assigning expenditures. We're going to have to dig in deep and put everything that we can into categoricals. This is a time to get as creative as we possibly can. One thing that we just want to highlight too for you is the HEROES money, right? So what's being worked on at the federal level now. Governor Newsom pulled a tool out of his political tool chest and said literally by the stroke of a pen, there's one person who can fix the LCFF cuts, and that's the president. So we'll see what happens there. Everybody that Superintendent Hoffman and I and Ms. Hayes have talked to, they believe there's going to be some relief that comes by way of the HERO Act, probably not the size and the magnitude of what just got out of the House. But none of that plays yet in the scenario as well, right? So we're just going to have to sit tight. We're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to see what comes forward and not panic, but make good decisions based on good information. So just stay tuned, and hopefully the federal government can act quick. They obviously helped us through the Great Recession. The key for us, and hopefully it's a takeaway that you got from Ms. Hayes' slide for the current year and future fiscal year is we need relief dollars in 21-22. So this isn't just a 2021 issue, but any relief dollars we can get in that budget year plus one or even two is really where we're going to need the help. And we need money that doesn't have strings attached. We don't need money that says you can only spend this on COVID-related expenses. We need money that's flexible that we can use to continue the current program that we have.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Madison.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Madison.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of uncertainties, and I don't have any real questions. I just want to really thank the Shannon's department for all the preparations they've given us so far. I think we're very fortunate in the district to have that breakdown. I just want to mention, implore to all the board members to give their undivided attention towards the budget moving forward. There could be some real critical decisions that must be made here moving forward. And Rob and Shannon talked a lot about various scenarios. You know, I was involved with a lot of the recession problems we had back in 08, 09 with trans, and none of them are very fun. But I think if we can all have a good total understanding about this budget, making certain that we try to continue to educate our kids moving forward and making the right decisions. And to make those decisions, you have to understand the budget and the fiscal solvency of our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madison. Mr. Perez.
You could have Bobby go before me, please.
Okay. Ms. St. Helen.
Is this like, okay, I'll
I'm ready, I'm good. Can you hear me fine?
We can hear you, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Shannon and Rob. You know, this is the saddest report since I've served on the school board. It's very humbling and depressing, and there's no way to sugarcoat this. And, you know, I appreciate our dedication to fiscal solvency, but man, am I worried about our families, our kids, the future of public education as we know it. And, you know, that 18% unemployment rate, it's not just a number, right? These are real people that this impacts. It's going to impact the families of our students. This is very disheartening, and I don't have questions. I just have a lot of comments. But I know that I share this with all of you. I do appreciate some of the comments that have already been shared. Crystal, I had some of the same comments as well. But just the idea that we are, you know, that a part of our relief is going to be rested with what the federal government does, that really scares me. It doesn't take a genius, you know, you just turn on any network and all of the positional comments that go on. This is the time to come together as Americans, as for the best interest of our people, our families. They are hurting. And just as the back and forth right now is very disheartening. I'm hopeful that wiser heads will prevail, but because it's an election year, I'm also being realistic. I'm afraid. I'll be honest, I'm afraid for our families in the future right now, because I'm not seeing a lot of positive developments either. I see a lot of discussions, but not a lot of positive results right now, because everybody just seems to be locked down in this political battle, if you will. And right now we need to put all of that aside and come together and be collaborative and do what's best. So I'm going to be hopeful in that we are the 5th largest economy. And we have a lot of great minds and great leadership and to help us get through this. And I'm going to turn to you, Chet, as our senior board member to help us, because you've been there, and it's going to be a very difficult time for the rest of us who haven't gone through something like this. So I'm turning to you to help us with those discussions as our senior patron here, for your guidance and your input, because I not only have tremendous respect for you, but these are the times that we need that senior leadership to help us get through these very, very difficult times. I'll just rest at that I worry for our kids and I worry for public education. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez?
I don't have to push down the button?
I can hear you right now. Whatever you're doing was working. Please hold down the space bar, Mr. Perez, so we can hear you.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I have to hold it down.
Yes.
Okay. All right. First of all, thank you, Ms. Hayes and Mr. Pierce and Mr. Hoffman for this report, realistic issue that we have in our school district. And this is an issue that I know what's happening throughout the whole United States, California, but I think we are in the forefront of this problem, the sickness in which has caused a fiscal issue, you know, throughout the world and the United States and California and through districts. And I agree with you that our federal leadership, that's what I'm worried about. So in November, we need to get out the vote and participate and talk to everybody in the whole United States to bring about change and bring about change in education. That's going to affect us. We need this HEROES Act. We depend on it. You know, they bailed out the business community. He needs to bail out the health and safety.
Mr. Perez, we are not talking politics. We're talking about our budget.
Well, yes, okay,
Yes.
that's our budget. He's in charge
thank
of
you.
our budget. He's going to reflect the issues of what's
Mr.
going to
Perez,
happen.
please,
The learning
quit
curve,
referring to he.
the learning loss. It's a learning loss. So I'm very aware of that. So if it don't happen, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And our Governor Newsom and our legislative body at the Capitol are very astute on this issue. That's what's happening right now. They do not like all his cuts, Governor Newsom's, the Senate and Assembly. And they're with us. They know what we need. They're former educators, principals, administrators of educational systems throughout California. What I'm concerned about right now within our district, you talked about not having summer schools. How do you resolve the issue of educational loss if we do not have summer school? I'm thinking that we should have year-round school for areas 1s and 3s, the low-income communities here, because I know they lost a lot. I'm very concerned about that issue. You know that. I expressed that last time we met. And I will be expressing those issues to the legislative body. Now's the time to talk. And I know some of you have gone down there, did a terrific job speaking to our local legislators, and keep on doing that. Speak to those leaders in the Senate, educational committees, assembly committees. Very important time in education in California. Can't afford this. We need to invest in our students, not 3 years or 10 years later when they're in a major prison when we spent 86,000 plus locking them up. And I want to tell the public that we just received this report. No, just within an hour of this meeting, hours. So, you know, there's a lot to talk about on this subject matter. Like Mr. Forcina said, there's a lot of ifs and buts that are happening now that determine the outcome of next fiscal year 2021, 2022. So a lot of things could impact this budget, a lot of things. And I stated that politically, but other things too, you know, federally and statewide. I'm gonna get to this report. Oh, there's a lot of suggestions, just typos or just suggestions that I want to inform you that it'll make it a little bit more clear for our general public that's airing this board meeting.
If you want to talk to me about those, Mr. Perez, I'd be
Yes.
happy to go through the.
I'm gonna save time and discuss those with you and your staff. But again, I think the most important issue is that we have to continue going around year round. Our students have lost a lot of time of education. Learning loss, that's a new one. And distance learning instructions. Are we going to spend more curriculum instructions dollars in this area? Because I know for a fact that there's companies that are specialists in this arena, and they're doing a great job doing distance learnings with their curriculum of studies. And I know we're doing catch up, but you know, they already have programs and curriculum of studies that are already produced and having great outcomes. Even other school districts have this. Have we explored maybe talking with other school districts, sharing curriculum of studies?
Mr. Perez, are you talking about the budget? We're talking about the budget.
Yes, that's a budget item.
That's what I
that you mentioned that we will cut. But in the reality, we might have to spend monies for that type of money in curriculum, buying some other curriculum for distance learning.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
As a board, we would appreciate having succinct conversation at the end of a presentation. You're 6 minutes into your conversation after your presentation. And we are speaking about board item, these numbers, which you noted our staff was able to get together after an entire day of meetings and learn them only at 3:35 where they were able to send them out.
Correct.
And because it spent the entire time learning these numbers from professionals, Mr. Perez, we are being incredibly transparent to everyone with the information we have at the moment. So please,
I did not disagree with that.
Excuse me. Please direct your comments to this. And as Mr. Forcina hinted to and Ms. Martinez did, we are going to have to look at what changes need to be made, but that is not today's presentation. Today's is entitled a budget update, so we are all aware of where we are at. And please continue to make notes of anything you have that you think would be helpful in the future, and be sure and share those with Mr. Hoffman. But this is not the place for that part of that conversation. So please talk about these numbers and our budget update today.
I think I have been.
I don't agree.
So again, there's a lot of ifs and buts. We had this report, and maybe we ought to have an emergency meeting next week or tomorrow to deal with this issue and deal with it as a group in person.
Mr. Perez, emergency meeting tomorrow. We won't know anything tomorrow that we don't know today. So this is the kickoff of the budget process. We very well may need to have a special meeting between now in one of our meetings in June, that's possible. We'll have that conversation with President Albiani, but whatever time we need to be able to work through this process, we will do that. We know this is a challenging place, and not being able to be together in this very trying time makes this even more challenging. So your point's well taken, and we very well may need to put together a special meeting. It wouldn't be an emergency meeting. It would be a special meeting to be able to continue this conversation. But we're going to bring another presentation back in June for sure. And then we have the actual board presentation of the budget in the second meeting in June. So there's still time to work through this. We just wanted to get the information to you out as quickly as we could and as accurately as we could based on what we have right now.
Right. You know, the issue I talked to you earlier today or yesterday is regarding our budget rollovers from fiscal years from the LCAPs. You mentioned that those fiscal dollars, we spend all the supplemental concentration monies. That doesn't roll over. And I'm wondering about the Title I. Does Title I monies go back into the school budgets and all that? You didn't mention anything about Title I and the other title programs, how they might be affected.
Title I, unspent Title I dollars can be carried over up to a certain amount, but they stay within Title I. They do not turn into general fund dollars. And the piece that we talked about yesterday was Assemblyperson Weber's work with regards to some districts that were found in the audit that were taking supplemental and concentration dollars and not spending them where they said they were going to spend them, and then turning them into general fund dollars that were not restricted moving forward. So that's what that work is about that Ms. Weber's working on right now. But that's for future. That'll be part of the assembly process and the legislative process this coming session.
Okay. And has anybody seen the Cal Matters distance learning report regarding our budgets in this area?
Yes, we get all the information from Cal Matters.
Okay. I want to make sure that you guys look at that also. Well, thanks again for doing a great job.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. I've basically stated the points I wanted to make. I appreciate the transparency, and I want to stress the immediate sharing of the information we have done. We cannot be more upfront with our public, our employees, all the people who count on EGUSD. And we continue to be transparent, and we are going to have some very hard conversations ahead of us. I agree with Bobby. This is one of the most depressing things I've seen ever. But I do have faith that we will figure this out. And it won't be done in one meeting, but it will be done thoughtfully and over a matter of time. So thank you we will be very specific on our needs and continue to express those. I will see Bobby later this week on a call with someone from the federal government. So we will continue to share our story. I'd like to call, are there any bargaining units, Ms. Pinkerton, that asked for anything to be read tonight?
Beth, I wanted to make another comment, please.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Mr. Porter.
All right, thank you. With respect to the comments you just made, I think that one of our strengths for a number of years, and certainly right now, has been the issue of transparency. I think that real concerted effort has been made to provide thorough and honest information. And I believe that that is what is resulting in the positive effect that we have with respect to not only our bargaining groups, but our parents. We've taken special care with transparency. I just want to make one comment that as we go forward, that we don't want to get in a situation where we cannibalize one program for another. And what will be crucial is that we are inclusive. We can't ever lose sight of the need of inclusion. If we get in a situation where, unfortunately, Board Member Madison has been. We need to make sure that we have the information from all parties that may be impacted by the decisions. And I just want to leave that there, that inclusion cannot be left out of the equation. Thank you.
Inclusion and equitability. Thank you. Definitely. Ms. Pinkerton, did you have anything to read from our bargaining unit?
Sorry. Madam Board President, there are no public comments from the bargaining units.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call on board members and the superintendent who wish to submit reports on organization or committee meetings relative to the district and its operation. I think the easiest way for me would to just go through a roll call, and you can give me if you had anything. Dr. Martinez-O'Leary?
Just update report. I met with CSBA, California School Board Association, and we had a board of directors meeting. I also attended the May delegate assembly that Bobby, you, Beth, also attended. At our board of directors meeting, we went over the general overview in the agenda for the delegate assembly, which discussed the May revise, how it's impacting many districts, state level. So we also discussed too, for a separate committee I'm on, appointed by CSBA, is the AEC and the annual education conference coming up. So I just wanted to mention, because I'm on the committee, we are still accepting proposals for presenters for the December AEC, and the deadline is June 1st. And then we will be rating the proposals. The committee will. After that, we'll review all of them, and then we will also be making a call out for student performers who are interested. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that as well. They're planning for the December AEC to still be held in Anaheim. Due to certain circumstances, if that has to change, because we have to be flexible at this time, there will be an option to participate virtually if need be. So I just wanted to put that out there and make sure to mention those updates.
Thank you very much. Ms. Charis Espinoza?
No committee updates.
Thank you. Mr. Forshina?
No committee meetings.
Thank you. Mr. Madison?
I just want to report that the Elk Grove Regional Scholarship Foundation did give out their scholarships, 160, 170 of them. Unfortunately, as we all know, we didn't have our dinner this year because of COVID-19. We also, today I've got some new figures out on some of the revenues that we've lost also during the downturn of unemployment. So, but the Scholarship Foundation is still strong and hanging in there. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate it. My son wasn't awarded a scholarship.
Great.
Mr. Perez? Do you have committee work, Mr. Perez?
Maybe I'm supposed to go first.
Not on this list. Sorry, I picked a different. Mr. Perez, do you have any committee work to report on?
No, not this week.
Thank you very much. Ms. Singh Allen?
Yes, quick report, the CSBA Delegate Assembly meeting. The bulk of the time was spent on the schools and communities first, the split roll constitutional amendment, as you know. The Delegate Assembly overwhelmingly supported a no position. It's not opposition, but a no position that is not taking a position, and primarily because the timing. We're in a COVID-19 pandemic. There were very strong arguments in favor, particularly from our stakeholder groups that we collaborate very strongly with. But because of the timing that everybody's facing right now, overwhelmingly the school board trustees that are part of the delegate assembly overwhelmingly voted to take a no position at this time. what that ultimately means, what CSBA is going to do with that. I'll turn to Dr. Martinez and Larry perhaps to share what might become of this, because there is some concerns of, I won't say backlash, but the stakeholder relationships are very important to us, of course, because we collaborate on a lot of legislative issues. But again, I think there was somewhat of a consensus that a lot of those that supported this, that support occurred pre-COVID-19. And so our timing for this came during the pandemic. And that was something very important for a lot of, I don't know, Beth, do you call it? It was like 63% or something. It was a pretty high number to do a no position. So I just wanted to make sure that our colleagues were aware of that. And then the rest of the balance of the meeting was spent on going over what we just did of how bleak the budget is, and setting up requisite meetings with our legislators and representatives in Congress as well, to make sure that education is represented not only in the halls of the Capitol here, but in DC as well.
Thank you very
concludes my
much.
report.
I think my activities were covered very well by Ms. Singh Allen, Ms. Martinez. So thank you, I appreciate that. We have other items from the floor. Just go backwards. Ms. Singh Allen? Nothing? Great.
Nothing.
Mr. Perez?
Yes, we got an email regarding Prop 13 support. What are we going to do regarding Prop 13 issues that may be on the November ballot? Are we going to have a meeting or support for or against?
At this point, the board has taken no position on that. We do have a legislative committee. Mr. Hoffman, would you like to direct?
Yeah, so that Prop 13 was actually a facilities bond that was on the March ballot that didn't pass. So that one's actually, the one that's called Prop 13 is actually completed. The measure that Ms. Singh Allen referenced earlier will be on the November ballot, and that is the split roll conversation. And that will be something that we will share with the legislative committee, and they'll make a determination whether we want to bring it forward to the board for a support. So we'll do that in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, and then just to echo Mr. Perez, that my report on that the CSBA, California School Boards Association, took a no position, not in favor or in opposition, but no position because of COVID-19.
Thank you. Mr. Perez, we good? Great. Mr. Madison?
Have none.
Thank you. Mr. Forcina?
I just have one. I certainly appreciate the efforts made by our students in many areas. One particular group of students is currently being affected by the fallout from COVID-19, and that's our FFA students. As we all know, county fairs, state fairs have been suspended. Our students spend a lot of time during the year raising animals to show and then sell. And the sales are important because the proceeds are used by those students not only to pay for the current animals they've taken care of, but for the following year. Students are asking for community support in participating in either the auctions itself or just sending donations to them to offset the costs that they've had. So I'd like to just make a public comment of the importance of supporting our FFA youth. Thank you.
Ms. Albiani, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to do a shout out to all of our seniors. I just realized this is the last board meeting before they officially graduate.
Oh my God.
So just Godspeed to all of them, and thank them all and the families for their hard work and going through, just enduring all of this. I know it's real challenging. I have a senior, shout out to my beautiful son, Sean Allen, and all of our amazing seniors who endured this very challenging times. But you know what? 10 years from now, you're going to learn from all of this and you're going to be stronger. And good luck to your next chapter in your life, and you're going to be doing amazing things. So just a shout out to the class of 2020. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Martinez-Soler?
Similar comments, just want to echo those that, for the class of 2020, we're in unique times. And given that, we're going to be having the virtual graduations. I know Chris Hoffman and Zanti have rolled out some communications, and a number of us have been involved rolling out in the early week of June. But again, just wanted to mention congratulations to the class of 2020. I have 2 nephews that will be graduating as well. And so I'm very proud of them, Elias and Luciano. And I just wanted to mention all the students just bearing with us during this time and understanding that this will definitely be something I know they'll all remember. And so I just want them to take the time to appreciate their accomplishments.
Thank you. I think I can speak for the rest of the board. We are all very saddened not to get to shake your hands on stage and congratulate you in person and see your wonderful speeches and performances, which are the highlight of our school year. I think I speak for everyone. It's always fantastic to see each school express themselves and their character. It looks like we will be able to get together as groups of 10 to watch the ceremonies, which is a positive. And we will be doing that as a family. Too bad I start with 6. So thank you very much to my board members. I think we're in for a trying year, but I think we are up to the challenge just as our students are up to this challenge. And
Albiani?
Mr. Hoffman, I skipped you, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ms. Chairs Espinoza.
And me, be brief. Thank you, colleagues, for helping us all bring it back to something more positive. This is a very exciting time of year. Those of us who have this perspective of being on the school board, or God forbid, have work that relates to public policy in the state, have been seeing a lot of these things coming. So dispariting, I think, is the word of the day. I think someone in public comment at the top of the meeting raised issues about concerns about students for whom school is also an escape, it's a lifeline. And I just wanted to assure all of the people who we serve that those considerations are never far from our mind. In fact, that's what's been causing lots of us to lose sleep for months now. So that is the hard work that we're in the midst of now, and that we'll be doing for months and maybe years to come. But that's what we're here for. And the reason we do it all is so that students can have the achievement and the success that we get to celebrate now, albeit under unusual circumstances. So many thanks to all of the administrators and staff who put together these virtual ceremonies that allow some kind of connection. And I can't wait to see them, and congratulations, class of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Just very quickly, thank you to the board for your thoughtfulness with regards to not only our class of 2020, but then also the issues that are directly in front of us with regards to the budget. To the kids, you are the reason we do the work we do. And again, my hand, I usually shake 7,500 hands, over a 4-day period. And so I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but I do have in the bottom of my heart the hope that we will be able to do something of an in-person down the road. But I hope you absolutely take advantage and enjoy the virtual graduations. I did get to see some of the speeches of principals and your fellow classmates, and I do think the overall quality of the production will be, outside of the superintendent giving a speech, the rest of it are really high quality. So I wish you all the very best, and thank everybody involved.
Okay, seeing no other business, I'll adjourn this meeting at 7:40. Thank you very much. Be safe.
Night.